All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on our last day of Sans lectures. Today, we are joined by Anna Collard. Anna, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm not sure, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can hear you, Emma. Thank you.
Perfect. So Anna is the SVP of Content Strategy and Evangelist for Know Before Africa, where she drives security awareness across the African continent. Collard is a Global Council for Responsible AI ambassador and a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on Cybersecurity. She co-founded the MIDO Cyber Academy to bridge South Africa's cyber skills gap and has earned multiple accolades, including Top 20 Global Cybersecurity Women 2024 and Global Cybersecurity Women of the Year 2023 People's Choice. Thank you so much, Anna, for being here today, and I will pass you the word.
Thank you so much, Emma, and thanks everyone for taking the time. It's a real privilege to be here. I just want to make sure that I'm sharing the right slides because I've got two screens. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it's okay, perfect. Right? Yeah, we can see it.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. Yeah, well, thank you so much again. I think that my talk might be a little bit different to the other classes, assuming that a lot of your courses so far have been around, I assume, AI and technology and emerging tech. And mine is a little bit more maybe old school because it's about the humans and the human factor, as well as what the technology, I suppose, that's between our ears, sort of, our minds and brains. I'm a cyber psychologist, and I'm really fascinated about the intersection, really, of humans and our behavior and technology. But before I dive in, I just wanted to bring this image up again. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It went quite viral in America last year when they had that bad flood, I think in Florida and areas over there. And what happened was that people, I mean, including some of my colleagues who live in Tampa and in Florida, they had to get evacuated because there was really bad storms and floods. And what happened was that someone posted this image of a little girl in a boat with a puppy in the rain. And I think, even my daughter, when she looked at it, she was like, oh, this is so sad. Like, it pushed all the emotional triggers that there are. And when fact checkers sort of highlighted that, this is clearly a deep fake. I mean, the puppy changes the color, the girl has 6 fingers in one of those images. It's so clearly a deep fake. What happened was, and this is, I think, the concerning thing about this whole time that we live in, is that people were still sharing it. And they said, well, yeah, it might be fake, but it's still confirming my belief in the fact that the government is failing us, and sort of spreading that disinformation or misinformation message, rather, that has, in this case, it really has negative consequences to people that are meant to help in the real emergency cases, or it diverted attention from what's really happening on the ground. And I think this is just one of those examples that I find so fascinating, that it's not about deep fakes because, or even deep fake technology, because, like I said, people still shared it even though they knew it was fake. So it's more about let's say that the willingness of us humans to share falsehood and lies as long as it confirms our own beliefs and biases. And then something that we have to keep in mind is an effect that's called the illusory truth effect, which is literally, it means that our brains, first of all, they really prefer content that's easy to process. So we much rather watch something that's easy and simple. But then, and I think this is self-explanatory, but then the next thing is that our brains also think, if it's easy to understand, if it's easy to process, which emotional content often is, because we see it, we immediately feel something, we believe it's true, even if it isn't. And that is really, really dangerous and something to keep in mind. And a story that happened to me actually on the weekend is that I was invited to a braai, maybe for the Dutch participants barbecue. And one of the people at that barbecue, very educated, professional, man who, like used to be an executive, so really an educated person, was telling me about how Zelensky is so corrupt, and he bought all these ships, and he's got property in Florida, and I mean, this was making the rounds, I think, nearly a year and a half ago on social media, and it was debunked. Like, this is not true. This is like total Russian propaganda. Yet this highly educated person was telling me, like, really with like emotions, that no, that he deserved that treatment, and it just is another example of how this polarization and the, let's call it, the infection of our minds has gone so far that it doesn't matter how educated you are necessarily, or how much. And I was told by the same gentleman that I need to go and read my facts, etc. That it goes so far in people's belief systems, and it's so difficult to actually convince people of the truth. And another fact that I think is very dangerous, again, if we apply to current geopolitical landscape, is like the more we see something, the more we also believe it to be true, or we like it even if we didn't like it in the beginning. And obviously, without calling any names, now we know certain politicians are absolutely amazing in that, saying the same simple to understand things over and over again, so that it's ingrained in the electorate or in the people voting for them. And that also means that, lies and falsehoods, unfortunately, get shared so much quicker than the truth, can catch up. This is like a famous quote. I'm sure, like, I was told that Churchill even stole it from somebody else. So it's been around for a long time. But I think the problem with the technology and the pace of innovation and the pace of things happening is that this fact that a lie can get halfway around the world before the truth can even catch up or put its trousers on has never been more true than it is today. And this also means that, our battlefields are more in our minds really than anywhere else. And it's in terms of democratic values and everything that's going on in the world beyond just cybersecurity. Obviously, that's a very important component of it, but it's something to keep in mind when we talk about the human factor and how that gets exploited in our infrastructures and cybersecurity context as well. And to be honest, like, when we talk about the human factor or social engineering, that has also been around for many years. Bruce Schneier has mentioned, amateurs hack system, professionals hack people. Another famous hacker, Kevin Mitnick, who unfortunately he passed away, I think about a year and a half ago. They weren't necessarily amazing technical hackers, but they were really good con men or con artists that managed to trick people into doing something that was not necessarily in their best interest. And that's really what the definition of social engineering or hacking the human is all about. It's tricking someone into doing something or manipulating them into doing something that's not in their own interest. And that also explains why in a lot of the cases, and it doesn't matter which report you look at, they're always different numbers or stats, but in average, like, the numbers that get quoted is between 70 and 90% of the cases of, let's say, a data breach or a cybersecurity challenge, social engineering or the human factor was involved in some form or shape. The second one that's always gets listed there is credential theft, which also in most cases starts with a social engineering attack. Like, I need to trick you into divulging your credentials. And then unpatched systems is sort of also in the top 3. And I've already mentioned AI. Obviously, unfortunately, that means the accessibility of it and the ease of use and the affordability means that anyone in this world that has the right malicious intent or motivation now has the power that was previously sort of reserved to the big nation states and the big, let's call them, cyber criminal syndicates that really needed to spend money and effort into developing these tools. Nowadays, anyone can create really sophisticated attacks. And when I say attacks, I mean social engineering attacks that look legit, previously telling someone to look out for spelling errors or things like that, that doesn't it doesn't help anymore, because any phishing email nowadays it can be created with ChatGPT or similar generative AI models and look very, very much legit. And obviously AI agents are all the rage for this year. And if we think about how the sort of autonomous agents that could literally take multiple tasks of a cybercrime attack chain or kill chain and automate that for the cyber criminals even more so, it's quite scary in terms of what's coming at us right now. The benefit on the other side is obviously that we also have access to the same technology on the defending side, and we can make use of AI as well to fight the AI, so the good AI versus the bad AI. I just thought it, from a if we talk about ease of use, and particularly in the deepfake kind of world, I dabbled with it last year a little bit because I had to sort of just figure out for myself how difficult it is, and I used a tool. I think it was called HeyGen. It didn't cost a lot of money. It took me 10 minutes, and I could create a really, really good deepfake of myself. And it just shows how, if I can do it in 10 minutes, like anyone can do it. And what's so scary, though, is that my colleague just recently, I think this was yesterday or the day before, he went and he tested these AI-based detection services that are supposed to pick up deepfakes and AI-generated fake content. And unfortunately, as it stands today, it's very costly to do that sort of analysis, particularly if you want to do it real time. It's super high process intensive and costly. So it's not really the social media companies are not really using it. But they're also not very accurate. I mean, when Perry tested, he tested about 5. He doesn't want to shame anyone, so he didn't say which ones he tested, but all of them failed detecting a deepfake video that he created of, I think it was Lisa Pledgemere, I can't even pronounce her name, but she's like the head of, I think it's the National Security Alliance or something. So until the technology on the good side or the defending side is ready enough, we still have a huge reliance on the human factor, on us, to pick up if we're being manipulated. And sometimes it doesn't even have to be this fancy deep fake, right? Like it could be a cheap fake, but if it's used cleverly in the right context, then we can still fall for it. So the message really is we have to, focus on how can we help or equip or empower the humans in our overall security program to help them develop something that I call the zero trust mindset. Zero trust, your normal user won't like it, but in security, we love it. But it's really also about digital mindfulness and like a form of presence to be more skeptical. And I'll talk about what that means, and then I'll share a little bit about how do we actually run this in organizations. And then I also thought, when I looked at the 4 challenges that you guys are working on, which, by the way, I think that each of them it's so interesting, how the human factors or some of the questions that you might want to ask when you're working on the responses to those challenges, how you can bring in the human factor as well. Okay, so let's start with the theory. Actually, before I start with that, and I'm sure, Noelle, you've heard the story before. I've told it so many times, but it's such a pivotal moment in my career. I've been in cybersecurity for over 22 years now. I've spent the last 10 years only on the human factor and teaching people how to not fall for phishing emails. But about 2 years ago, so I was sitting in an Uber car and I was talking to the driver, I was packing my bag, I was looking outside, and at the same time, I was also checking my emails on my cell phone. Bad idea, because in that exact moment, I got this particular Uber phishing email. It was just a simulation that our IT guys send out to basically train us. But in that moment, my brain was sort of in heuristics mode. I was multitasking, thinking in the Uber car, I'm getting an Uber message, must be legit, and I clicked. And then, as like a sort of punishment or consequence, I had to take a training program that I've actually developed myself a couple of years before. What was interesting in this incident was that the IT guys sent out a survey where they asked me, what happened? Where were you? Like, what was the reason behind you failing this test? And I said, this is really interesting data. I want to know what the rest of my colleagues, when we fail these tests, which we shouldn't because I work for a company that sells security awareness training, but we do. And you can see here that in the majority of the cases, it's not lack of training. It really is because we're busy, we're multitasking, we're distracted, we're tired, that made us fail or click on these phishing simulations. And that then led me down a really like a deep rabbit hole in terms of research and looking at these different human vulnerabilities or susceptibility factors that make us do things that we shouldn't be doing, like clicking on things, and sort of susceptible to online manipulation and social engineering in particular. And I basically wrote my master's thesis about this topic, and I found, and those are just like 33 that I've documented. There's many, many more, but I found basically 33 factors that span from cognitive to psychological, situational factors that make us more likely to fall for a social engineering or phishing attack. And here they are all listed. And what I found was interesting is that your typical traditional security awareness training, that's like sort of once a year we do this long compliance training, or maybe we do a bit of phishing simulation and like a little phishing reminder, is not going to address any of those other than maybe the IT knowledge or expertise. It doesn't address the fact that multitasking makes us vulnerable. It doesn't address the fact that, for example, we have all these cognitive biases, like the illusory truth bias that I shared with you earlier on, or the fact that, for example, in the afternoon, our decision-making ability goes down the drain and we're more likely to fall for certain things. So it's really interesting to consider the human factor as this complex machine, the system that has lots and lots of different variables, and they're also interdependent of each other. Like, to give you an example, if your personality type or trait, if you're high on neuroticism, which is like high on emotional sensitivity, which I, by the way, happen to be, unfortunately, on that spectrum, then you are more likely to get manipulated by emotional content. It also means that you will struggle with self-control more so than somebody who's lower on that spectrum. So all of these have sort of interdependent kind of links with each other, and we have to consider that when we're dealing with our human audience, or the people that we try to protect. And then the question is, well, geez, if we humans are so vulnerable, like, is there a patch for it? Like, from a security point of view, we always think about in terms of how, vulnerabilities equals, threat times vulnerability equals risk. How can we reduce the risk? And there are approaches, and we can learn from countries, for example, such as Finland or Taiwan, also the Ukraine, that had to fight against what they call cognitive warfare for many, many years, from Russian propaganda, Chinese propaganda, and they've identified that cognitive security, so really their people's, their citizen minds, is part of national defense. And what that means is that they, for example, if we look at, for example, Finland, they start with this critical thinking, this idea that we need to instill people from a young age, like from kindergarten onwards, the ability to be skeptical and to interrogate when they see something. Like, if you're a student in Finland, apparently, so I've read, it's like they give you these challenges where you have to analyze a social media post from different countries and look at the news that was published related to it, by different publishers, left, right, different countries. So it's really important to, I feel, to also instill that kind of critical thinking in our, like in South Africa, particularly with our youth, and basically build that rational capacity, that will also help us in not just against propaganda and disinformation and political manipulation, but also against other social engineering attacks. And then if we look at the more organizational structures, like a company, the latest buzzword there, we moved away from security awareness and it became security culture. Now the latest buzzword is human risk management. Same thing, just different color. But what I think what is important here is like that the industry has identified that human risks or human behavior is quite complex. It's very multifaceted, and it needs, like anything in security, we need a multi-layered approach. So defense and def applies here, and it means that we need to layer not just training, not just technology, not just processes, like all of these components have to work with each other to address this really important, still very important human factor that's sort of intertwined in all of this. And yes, of course, the goal should always be to prevent, for example, bad things from entering the network so that your users will never be exposed to a real attack. But the reality is that in their personal lives, they might be, or something might, in fact, quite a few of these attacks will manage to get through the filtering or gateway technology. So you still have to absolutely address that human factor. Here's just another way of sort of showing the layered defense. So you first start with stopping bad things from entering. I think that makes sense, right? We want to protect the user as much as possible, but then we also need to educate them about what happens if it goes through, and what happens if you're at home, and all of these things. So we need to train them. We need to, and this is something that's also very interesting, is that phishing simulations, so sending fake phishing emails, is not meant to be a method of tricking people. It's a training technique. It's a really good way of exposing people to attacks without having to experience real attacks. And it's really important from a training point of view. Real-time coaching is another training mechanisms. And then we have to empower them. We have to give them tools to, for example, if we want them to have strong passwords, we'll give them a password manager. No human brain can remember 16-digit passwords, that are unique across 300 accounts. It's not possible. So we need to empower them with the right tools. We have to have a no-blame culture. I know in certain environments, it's much stricter, like, if you fail a phishing simulation, for example, multiple times, there's disciplinary. But in general, a more positive no-blame culture will get more in terms of people's buy-in and being engaged and motivated to do the right thing than the negative culture. And then also, just as anything resilience, just preparing for the fact that when something goes wrong, can we learn from this? How can we contain it? And then share the intelligence. And then something that I've mentioned in the beginning is really this concept of zero trust, right? Like I'm sure in the networking and in the other security courses, you would have come across this concept, which has been floating around for quite a few years, that zero trust really means that any system will not trust any request by default before it's verified. And if we apply that to the humans, it means the same thing, right? If we can build this healthy dose of skepticism, get people to pause before they react, and like verify and engage more intentionally. And obviously, we can't have people walking around being completely paranoid and not trusting anyone and anything necessarily. Like, there is that element of humanity that is actually a survival concept, that we have to have a level of trust. But the way I try and explain it is that if we can get to a sort of built-in automatic vigilance that happens when I travel to Johannesburg, for example. No offense to any Joburgers on the call, but what happens when I land in Johannesburg, I automatically am more vigilant. I automatically put my handbag at the bottom of the car. I'm not stressed about it. I'm not overly, paranoid, but definitely my vigilance goes up a notch. And if we can do the same in the digital realm, is to teach people to develop this sort of zero adaptive trust mindset, that context depending. So if they are faced with something, let's say, for example, ask them to do a financial transaction, then all their spidey senses need to be up, right? To sort of develop a second nature vigilance and a habit-based digital mindfulness. And this really takes me to what this is all about, is like mindfulness. What is this? Like, what does that even mean? And in its like really original sense, mindfulness just means paying attention. It literally, that's all it is. It means paying attention to the here and now without necessarily having a whole lot of other stories in your mind, without judging it. And if we have 2 minutes, I would love to actually like demonstrate this with you. And I know it's difficult to do this like over Teams. It's much easier if I saw you in person, but maybe give it a try anyway. And it's a small little attention and intention exercise just to demonstrate what I really mean with mindfulness and how well it really works. So if you indulge me, I would invite you to sort of take a deep breath into your nose and then feel your belly expand as you take that deep breath in. And then on the exhale, can you feel how your belly deflates? And maybe we do this again. Are you taking a deep breath in? Hold it. And then on the exhale, can you feel how your air really goes out of your belly and your belly deflates? And then we just do this one more time. So deep breath into your belly. And out again. And the idea is to pay attention to your breath and your body at the same time. And that's the first step, is really attention. And then the second step is the intention. It's like it's directing your attention towards something. And because you're all here with the goal, I'm hoping with the end goal of becoming a cybersecurity professional or ending up in our wonderful industry, I invite you to, if you're welcome to do this, is to close your eyes and visualize how it will feel like when you're at the end of this challenge, at the end of this course. Like, picture yourself, you've done your best, you've given everything. How does it feel like when you succeeded? Like, how does success look like and how does it feel like? And then can you imagine how you, for example, you're presenting your challenge, you're confident, you know what you paid attention to, there's all the details, you worked on that really hard and you made an impact. And again, what mindset helped you to get there? Was it being focused, being attentive? Was it teamwork? And maybe just hold that in your mind for a second. And maybe now we fast forward into a couple of years in the future. And can you imagine yourself being a successful professional in the tech industry in a few years from now? And what kind of professional do you want to be? And how does it look like? How does it feel like? And then just maybe in the present tense, have an intention just for yourself. You can say it silently, something around, I am fully focused, I'm present, I pay attention, something around that. Whatever you felt when you saw yourself in the future and the sense that you got from that future you being successful and happy in your new role. And that's a very small kind of example of what mindfulness is all about. Mindfulness is about paying attention. And also, as a second step, intentionality is a really powerful mindfulness exercise to get you to your goals and to do the right thing. And what's so interesting from a science point of view is that it's proven that mindfulness techniques, and I'm not talking about a 10-day silent yoga retreat, like literally small little things that we just did here, is proven to reduce stress, to improve your cognitive abilities, to be better in the present moment and improve meta-awareness, and also helps people to regulate their emotions. And all of those benefits, and those are just the ones that I looked at in terms of the context of digital spaces. Like, there's other benefits like longevity and health and all of that. But in terms of our digital spaces, those are the benefits that are really relevant. And guess what? If we now apply those benefits to those human factor vulnerabilities, we can see that mindfulness addresses 23 out of the 33 susceptibility factors. That's more than any other sort of standard policy-based old school security awareness training. And this is like all good and well, yeah, Anna and her theory, but how do we actually do this in reality? Like, how do we apply this? And I've already mentioned sort of the problem with awareness training alone is not going to change people's behavior. It doesn't result in secure behavior. So what we want to do is build this security culture, or this digital mindful culture. And we have to do this like any other big culture changes. We need to get the people in, you have to pick them up at their hearts, in their minds. We have to try and influence their behavior with the goal, obviously, of reducing risk. And funny enough, we can even learn from the bad guys as well as from the marketing and communications people how to do this. And one aspect, or one scientific area to look at how do we get people to do things or change things or apply new habits is through a domain called behavioral science or behavioral design. And the person that has really given it its name is BJ Fogg, and he has a great model called the BJ Fogg behavior model. And he says if you want to change behavior, particularly like let's say in a group, you need to have three things. We have to motivate the people. So we have to engage them. We have to pick them up. We have to provide them with the right tooling or the ability. And then we have to remind them every so often. So we have to nudge them or prompt them. And if we start off with the first step, like how do we motivate people? How do we pick people up in terms of wanting to be more mindful online or to do the right thing when it comes to cybersecurity, not click on stuff, not fall victim, etc.? Well, anyone you talk to will not want to fall victim, right? So if you make it personally relevant, people will pay attention. If you talk to them about what it means being the one who clicked and then the whole company is becoming hacked, etc., that's embarrassing. Nobody wants to do that. So generally people do actually want to do the right thing, but they don't necessarily know how to do it. They don't understand what those threats are, etc. So we need to like pick them up, engage them, motivate them through content that's interesting, personally relevant, not too long, short, etc. Then we have to give them the tools, the ability. And like I said early on, the easier we make it to the person to basically choose the right behavior, the better. So provide them with all sorts of tools, whether that's reporting a phishing email, make that easy, making it easy to come up with the strong passwords, making it easier, for example, with multi-factor authentication, we use these like these FIDO tokens, so it's easier. I don't need to type in my password every time. So whatever makes it easier will also actually make it more secure if that's and this needs to be baked into your actual security programs, right? And then we need to remind people. I mean, a great prompt is when people type in a password and the system immediately tells you this is a terrible password or it's a good password. But there are a lot of other use cases as well where you could use this technology of reminding people to do the right thing. Like, for example, we have these email banners that come in not all the time, but only when the email is suspicious. It will say, look, this email looks like it could be suspicious. It's emotionally triggering. Do you want to slow down? That's a good reminder. And in the moment coaching. Something to also remember when you're dealing with people is that we will forget. So there's the so-called Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. So like I said, if you just do one big training a year, that's not going to stick. So rather doing sort of smaller but micro dose trainings throughout the year is more effective. And I did mention phishing simulation tests. I really feel and I know this is like a polarizing topic, like some people hate them, others love them. I must say, as a practitioner, I really believe in them. I think that they are, as a training tool, really effective. However, you need to do it the right way. Like it has to be communicated as a training tool. One shouldn't be using very nasty types of phishing emails that when a company is going through restructuring, to send out a bonus thing is just not nice. So having a more ethical and holistic approach to this is really important, but they really create these teachable moments. It's very effective if you gamify it. I mean, we get phished every week. Like every week I get at least 1 or 2 phishing emails, and it does sort of up my vigilance. And like I said earlier on, you also have to develop that psychological safety in the culture, that it's okay, even when you fail, that you learn from it. And it's a training technique rather than a just a sort of measurement technique. And something also to remember is there's an effect called the prevalence effect that takes place when people don't get exposed enough to the bad stuff because we block it all, right, which is good. Then they will unlearn, or they won't remember how to detect it if they maybe in an environment where they're not protected. So it's important to expose them to whatever the latest scams are quite frequently so that they keep up that knowledge. So if they only rarely see a phishing email, they will become worse at spotting them. So it's important to remember that. And another reason why phishing simulations are actually a good thing from a training point of view. And then I just thought I'll share some learnings from the horse's mouth. So this is a bank in South Africa that has run cyber mindfulness as like a overall security culture campaign for about 18 months now. And the important thing there is, like with any security human project, you need to start off with executive buy-in. They need to be on board. Also, people look at what their leaders are doing. So it's very important to have them on board from day one. And then to work with different departments. So in this case, the security team has worked with the corporate wellness team, actually, and they've even went out on corporate wellness sort of road shows where the two teams work together. And in the beginning, the users would say, well, what is corporate wellness to do with cybersecurity? And then when they explained the whole concept of, well, if you're multitasking, if you're stressed, if you're not paying attention, you're more likely to click on things and, fall victim. So we want you to be in a better mind state. It made sense. And also it allowed them to distill the message from a non-technical and more human, more empathetic point of view. Obviously, getting feedback from the user is super important, making it personally relevant, and also instilling a little bit of fun wherever you can. So this was it in terms of the theory and the practice, and I think we still have, cool, I still have a bit of time, because I thought what I wanted to do now is to go through your challenges. Unless if there are any questions, maybe I must actually stop here before we go into your challenges and the human factors to see if there are any questions. Yeah.
So yeah, you could do this either way. There's two questions you can take now if you would like to.
Okay. Let's have a look.
And then if you want to go on to the challenges. So I'm just going to enable mics here. And the first question is from Chanda. Chanda, you can ask Anna your question, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Anna. Yeah, actually, my question is, how can mindfulness practices be integrated with IoT security protocols to address sectors, to address so what I mean is, how can mindfulness protocols be integrated with the IoT security protocols to address the situation of being
being distracted, or I'm trying to understand, like, your IoT. So this is your Internet of Things, right? Like your
No, what I mean is, when there is scattered attention, there is scattered attention. So when there is scattered attention, how can mindfulness practices be integrated with IoT security protocols to address scattered attention?
Chanda, I must say, on behalf of Anna, I think it's a really difficult question, and I'm also battling to understand the actual question. So I think just in order to be able to move along, I'm going to change it up a bit to perhaps what I think you might be getting to, and that is, let's imagine a factory shop floor where you've got a vast number of IoT smart devices and operational technology is also connected to the network. People are working with all the time. It's a very dynamic environment. What are your thoughts about the importance of cyber mindfulness in a busy type of work area where there's multiple devices that people are working with all at once? Because that's the future of the workplace. What does that look like for you guys in terms of cyber awareness and mindfulness?
Yeah, okay, thanks. I think that's in general something to keep in mind, regardless of what the technology companies are wanting to tell us, is that we are not made to multitask. It's terribly bad for us having to look at multiple screens at the same time. And yes, I think the future, particularly if I think about SOC environments or security environments, is to have AI agents to take care of that, so that you have a technology that can look at multiple things at the same time, and you then as the human can stand behind it and focus at the thing that needs to be where you have to focus on. To ask someone to divert their attention across multiple things at the same time is really, really bad for us. There's a lot of research that says particularly multimedia multitasking. So media multitasking, meaning being on multiple screens, is it's not only inefficient and sort of doesn't work well, but it's also really bad for us, can even lead to mental health issues, because you're creating this sort of dopamine feedback loop and addictive effect to it. So yeah, if you can in any way, and I know it's difficult, I'm the same, I have lots of things going on at the same time. But if you can, use something called the Pomodoro technique, where you focus on one thing at a time. You take breaks in between, so your brain can like context switch, and then you'll be surprised how much more you actually get done if you slow things down and just focus on the one thing at hand, if that makes sense. So from a future point of view, use AI agents to do the multitasking, but focus your mind on one thing at a time.
While I'll get down unmute to ask question. I just want to comment on something. I went to the cinema the other day with my husband for the first time in years, and multiple people in the cinema sat scrolling through their phones through the whole movie, and I couldn't understand it. And it's a typical example of what you're saying. People just don't know how to switch off.
Yes.
We've lost the ability to actually just focus on what we're actually doing. They've paid a lot of money to be sitting in there and they're scrolling on their phones. So it gives you an idea of the extent of the problem in terms of concentration. Ogidan, you have the mic.
Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mrs. Anna Collard. My question is that can mindfulness training reduce human errors in cybersecurity?
Yes, it can. There's research that showed that it can do that, and I'm busy with like even more detailed research. Obviously, like it depends also, but yes, there's definite benefit of mindfulness training, and it does make people less likely to fall for manipulative attempts. I can share the research with you if you're interested, Ogidan.
Okay, ma. Yes.
So, Mokhatli, I'm going to let you go, and I think we'll get back to the next exercise that you want to do about the challenges, and then we'll see and proceed to the next questions. Tuso?
Hey, everyone. Can you hear me?
Hi, Tuso.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I actually have it's not a question actually, it's a concern. Okay, so what I'm concerned about is when dealing with insider threats, it's privileged access controls one of the main focus to look into when maybe dealing with internal investigations and security measures.
So if I understood you correctly, Tuso, then your question was insider threats. So those would be people that are internal and with malicious intent, right? That does happen, and you have about maybe 1 or 2% of the population that could fall in that bracket. So obviously for them, any mindfulness or security awareness training doesn't work, because they already have the malicious intent, or they they possibly have been recruited by a syndicate from the outside. And yes, to protect against those cases, monitoring and sort of having detective controls in place that picks up if something is out of the ordinary, if they do something that is, not normal behavior. And then, yes, you also quite rightly mentioned privileged access management. Obviously, those are tools that are very important to make sure that nobody has the full power, so that you have like restricted privileges. And with these tools, also what they do is they do provide that monitoring capability as well. In the case of, like, how do you motivate, or how do you deal with those 1% to 2%? In that case, fear and disciplinary is unfortunately, is the only motivator, to let them know, hey, we're watching you, and we have detective controls in place. We know what you're doing, so don't even try.
Thanks, Anna.
Okay,
We've still
thank
got
you,
about
thank you.
14 minutes. Still got about 14 minutes left. So if you want to tackle the challenges, I think we'd all love to hear what your thoughts on those.
Okay, yes, yeah. So I had a look at the challenges. Let me just share my screen again. And geez, like in some way I'm like, oh, I wish I could be a student. They sound so cool. So the first one, am I sharing the right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So the first one was the digital threat landscape for the NATO summit, right? That's one of your challenges. Now, obviously, I'm not going to give you the answers here, but I wanted to just throw out the questions here in terms of, for example, if you think about cognitive warfare. Now, obviously, the NATO NATO summit that's very geopolitical. It's very polarizing again. Like, think about, what kind of disinformation campaign could adversaries try and throw at it before and during and afterwards? Like, think about fake news, deep fakes, propaganda campaigns that create confusion, that create division amongst the people. What type of social engineering? Like, attackers might impersonate some of the officials or the politicians. They might come up with a story that's totally wrong and it causes havoc, or even, manipulate the media. How do they, and this is insider threats, right? Like, how can someone be tricked to become an insider threat or manipulated to partake in these attacks? So really think about, well, from a human psychological point of view, like what could the risks be for this summit? And then again, they're not necessarily technological. Like, what psychological tricks are they going to apply here? Is it fear? Is it urgency? Are they using trust? And then obviously, ultimately, like, what is your suggestion when you're working on your challenge? Like, how can you create the cognitive defense against all of these, let's call them human factor attacks or campaigns? So this would include both the people that are at the summit, the people that work there, that organize it. When you're working on the challenge, like, what are all the things that you have to keep in mind from a human point of view? The next challenge. Oh, this was just an example that I thought is very clever. Humor of a rumor is how some of the countries that are constantly under a cognitive attack, they use the humor effect to take away some of the power of the propaganda. Like, they really invite their citizens to use meme and pop culture to basically take the power away from the propagandists and make fun of them. So maybe that's one way of bringing that in as well. I don't know how much sense of humor that NATO has, but anyway. The second challenge, there was like that company, I think, that didn't have enough cyber controls. Our tech solution said it. Yeah, that's it. So again, here, like, if we talk about the human factor risks, if they don't have, like, any company, any organization has a culture, a security culture, it might just be a really bad one, right? So they also have a culture, but if nobody's responsible, if the employees don't see security as a responsibility, that's a big problem. So how do you change that? How do you build up a culture? How do you address roles that are not roles and responsibilities? If they're not assigned, then of course nobody thinks they're responsible, and then they also don't do proper awareness training. That's a problem. So think about that, like what types of risks does that create? I mean, all the stuff that I've mentioned before, with all these human susceptibility factors, the fact that now the bad guys have so much more great ammunition and technologies to make these social engineering attacks more powerful. It's so much more important nowadays to also get the people on board and make them aware of this. And if this is not done at this company, it's a big whoop. It's totally bad if they don't do it. Not just from a NIST point of view, just in general. Yeah. The third challenge was the impact of AI in cybersecurity. Big topic. Again, from a human factor. And I think in that challenge, as far as I remember, like you had to, the companies was thinking of deploying some AI internally. And obviously, like with any system, you have to think about the risks that come when deploying that system, that the type of access they have, but then from a human factor as well, like what are the blind spots? Where does the data come from? Can this data be manipulated? What are biases and transparency issues? How about the users themselves? How could they get manipulated again by deepfake and AI generated attacks? Over reliance on AI. What happens when people just stop thinking critically altogether? What if they upload all their PII or company sensitive information? So those are the types of questions that I would ask myself when I look at this challenge and then think about the humans. And also something that's really interesting is in the real world, a lot of companies are still not training their users on how to use, generative AI responsibly, or warn them about these new AI-driven attacks. So that's an important factor to take in mind. And then the supply chain, obviously supply chain, that's a massive problem as well, is that if you were a bad guy, right? Or if I was a bad guy, of course I go after the little companies where I know they don't have, they haven't trained their users, they haven't really gotten the right controls in place. If I can trick them or trick their executive or break into their email, can I then, use that as like a channel to the big company? So supply chain is just as well, if not even more, vulnerable to these social engineering attacks and phishing attacks, etc. So think about that as well. How would you then help your vendors or your partners to address that? Like if they don't have necessarily the budgets or the resources, how can you make sure that they also think about the human factor when it comes to security controls? Yeah, those were just my thoughts in terms of the challenges that you guys are working on. Really exciting. I think those are really good ones. And this also takes me to the end of the slides. And just to summarize it, technology alone is not going to do everything. It will do a lot. And like I said, we must always try and protect the human as much as possible. However, there's that human element will still remain for a long time. The social engineers and the attackers know that, and they will specifically target those vulnerabilities or susceptibility factors. But if we cultivate security cultures and we're bringing in more holistic kind of approaches, zero trust mindsets, maybe digital mindfulness, then that's a way of making let's call them your humans, part of your strongest security assets. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much again for having me. I'm on LinkedIn. If anyone of you wants to connect, I'm always happy to stay in touch. And even if you have questions afterwards, I'll try and get back to you. And I wish you super good luck for the challenge and the rest of your career ahead. And I think we still have some time for questions if there are any.
Thank you, Anna. I really enjoyed your comments on the challenges. I think it's given the students some deeper perspectives, perhaps, on how to really innovate around these challenges as well. Takunda, you can Magugu, you can unmute your mic and ask Anna your question. Secunda?
So,
Yeah,
am I audible?
you are audible. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. As I was following along with today's lecture, it became apparent to me that the human factor is rarely explicit. It's mostly implicit when frameworks are being made, when upper management is putting in controls in place. It's not considered explicitly. So now my concern is I'm at the very beginning, making the first few steps to get into the field of cybersecurity. How can I ensure that I also take into consideration this human factor, because it's increasingly important, as the chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and we need to support the human factor as much as we can. So I just need, it's more like a piece of advice on how I can always ensure that in the things that I'm learning, in what I venture into, because I would like to be in governance in one day, at some point in the future, actually make sure that I consider the human factor as utmost important as well.
I think, Takunda, you already have. The fact that you just mentioned it, it's amazing to see, that you have that recognition. And I'm sure if I come across you in 2 or 3 years, I meet you at a conference, I know that you will be the one who's rolled out a great governance structure framework, and the human factor will be right on top. So just keeping that in mind, I think that no matter where you end up, like anyone, even if you become a hardcore red teamer and pen tester, you will still try and trick the human on the other side. You will always think about the human. At the end of the day, until AI totally takes over anyway, we are still made of flesh and bones that actually use these devices, right? So just keep that in mind, that at the end of the day, we are here to protect data, but the data belongs to a human at the end of the day. So it is all about the people.
Lovely answer, Anna. Thank you. We're going to take one last question.
Keep that
from,
in mind.
Pranisha Rama. Pranisha, you can unmute your mic.
Hi, Anna. Just a comment from myself. So I'm in academia and I focus a lot on cybersecurity awareness. My research, everything has been around this area for like the last 10 years. And like, even if I have to just look at my most recent study, and I look at a lot of like university students, because, that in terms of like data and that's very easily accessible. And I just want to say, like, I think mindfulness is such an important thing, because in the most recent study that I had done with like the students, I presented them with like almost fake LinkedIn profiles, fake login profiles, and and so many of them were like, no, they would actually click on this. And it came down to just like mindfulness. And I honestly see this as something that universities should also kind of start implementing. So yeah, I really enjoyed your presentation, and it's something that I think from a research point of view, I'd also like to just investigate and, further my research in this area. Thanks, Anna.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Please stay in touch. We can geek out about it together.
Well,
Yeah, such important insights, Pranisha. I think in last year's Microsoft Threat Report, education had gone to the most attacked sector. So everybody's focusing on critical infrastructure, etc. But universities are, I want to tell you, ticking time bombs. And we've seen some significant university attacks. We actually had one of the lectures was about the one on University of Maastricht. So, Anna, this brings us to the end of our lecture. There's still students with their hands up, but unfortunately we have to let you go. I tell you, for the start of a long weekend, you drew a record crowd. You had about 340 people, 350 people in the room at one point.
Oh, amazing.
Thank you for taking the time. It's a difficult slot, and I'm sure your family are waiting for you. But we really enjoyed this lecture. It was out of the box wonderful, and I can't thank you enough. We know you're a busy, busy lady, so thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. And like I said, if you still have questions, just pop me a LinkedIn message and I'll try and get back to you. Especially it's about mindfulness. I can talk about this all day.
Thank you, Anna.
Thanks
and
for having
goodbye.
me.
Thank you, everyone.
Good luck,
And
everyone.
to the students, thanks. To the
Bye.
students, we'll see you in the next lecture. Last one on the SOC.